Hey, get in, fellas. It is Wednesday, March 19th, bracketology week, and all of you experts out there have sunk into your brackets, and play will start tomorrow at noon. Your boy has the Gators of Florida going all the way. Before I dive into this week's rundown, I want to take a quick call to action, assertively, not aggressively, but earnestly, asking people who listen to this show for feedback. It's been a while since we've asked, and let me tell you guys, we're looking to change things up in the next couple months, changing the whole format of the show, and we would love to hear from everybody on what they've learned so far, what they've enjoyed, what they haven't enjoyed, what's been helpful and what hasn't been. Listener asked questions. You know what? What stops people from submitting that kind of stuff? You can hit me via text, email, gettinfellowspod.com. You can DM us on the social media. Even better, if you want to be anonymous and give feedback because maybe you're anxious or you don't want to hurt feelings, you can do that too. You can get on our website, gettinfellowspod.com, and we have a section specifically to send us information. It comes right to our email, and you do not have to include a name or anything of the sort. So would really appreciate that because it'll help us pick the direction of the show. And hey, if you get a question on the show that I use for a segment, I'll send you something off the website. But while you're on gettinfellowspod.com, don't be afraid to buy yourself some merch. That would rock and help us keep going and growing this bad boy. For this week, we are going to continue in the neurodiversity block, having our good friend Andrew Joseph Shapiro. He came on a few weeks ago and talked about the psychology of advertising. And as difficult as it has been to succeed in the advertising world, AJ has done it with dyslexia, diagnosed as a kid. So he's going to help us understand dyslexia from his experience. Before that, I'm coming off a bros trip weekend that I do in Taos to go skiing with my friends every year. And it got me thinking, where are the places that it is culturally sanctioned for bros to talk about feelings? So Mike and Richie are coming on. We're doing a little draft of sorts of likely places that guys will talk about their feelings. And we're going to wrap this with CNN superstar Anderson the Silver Fox Cooper. He himself also grew up with dyslexia and has really thrived in spite of that. So we'll do him as BHoF today. All right, let's go. As we keep things superficial and sports related here, guys, I'm coming off the bros trip to Taos, New Mexico. Me and Mark, Bill, some people the audience has met before, go to Taos, New Mexico every year to ski, hang out, have a good time. And we inevitably end up talking a lot of feelings. Is that because it's three shrinks and a neurologist? Or is it because we're in a place that allows us to do so? We're all on today to talk about places where it's culturally sanctioned for bros to talk feelings. The chat was blowing up with lots of funny examples. Shout out Richie. We'll let him go first. He said, anywhere that eye contact can be avoided.
100%.
So Richie,
100%.
What are some examples you thought of when you were digging in?
Number one, campfire. It's dark. You don't have to look at each other. You can't really see each other. Just staring at the fire, watching the wood burn, and you can just let it out. And that fire's burning what you're saying. It's going up into the air and the smoke. It's the perfect place to talk feelings.
I feel like the campfire speaks to our like young, all boys were obsessed with fire and like wanted to light fires.
Oh yeah.
Know? So like it gets us a little regressed, and that's good for getting the feelings flowing.
I'm getting a little emotional just thinking about like a good old campfire. I don't know why we're not having a campfire right now.
Do s'mores help or hurt the vibe, the sharing vibe?
I'm 100% pro s'mores in every campfire situation. I don't know about the rest of you fellas, but there's no bad time for a s'more.
I want to quickly go on a quick s'more tangent. S'more is my favorite flavor of any dessert. However, the actual s'more itself is vastly overrated.
Whoa. I mean,
just throw it out
hot
there.
take.
Hard to it's kind of like a chicken wing argument. Like, how much do you want to work for your food? Because not only do you have to prep it, but it's messy. Is that what you don't like about it?
It's messy. Sometimes the gram doesn't really. It's just I'd rather have, there's so many other forms.
What is your guys' style for roasting the marshmallow? What is your style? Are you guys a light it on fire and let it burn? Or are you low and slow?
I'm like a 3 out of 10 toast.
To quote the father from The New Guy, shout out DJ Qualls, turn, don't burn.
I like to wait till the fire like burns down. You got some embers going and use the embers, not the fire, to cook the marshmallow. That's how you get that nice that nice golden brown color to it.
It's brought no emotional depth here. My number one choice in this pseudo draft is having a catch. When you're throwing a baseball back and forth, it's just a give and take. It's a natural type of conversation, father and son. You're learning, you're teaching, you're growing. So that was what came to my mind when you're having a catch. There's a great Letterkenny scene where Dan, Derry, and Wayne are throwing a baseball around, and then Dan gets comfortable enough to say, I know it's not polite. And then he asks if any girls have ever played with each other, their buttholes, like the other guys. And then they immediately turn and stop throwing the ball to him. And he's like, it feels good. It feels good. So shout out Letterkenny for always hitting the right mark. But they knew exactly, like, you're not going to talk about sex with men, unless you're having a catch or something.
Having a catch.
Yeah. It's the OG for a reason. I mean, everyone's been there, on a beach, throwing a football. And inevitably, just something about that back and forth. Like, the back and forth is going with the ball. Like, why not throw a little conversation in there too?
I think it's worth noting that eventually, if you're not talking about something, especially like it almost gets weird, right? It gets weird if you're just throwing it and there's no conversation. So either you're pretending to be an athlete or you're having a chat.
Because I know he's a loyal listener. When I met PFT Commenter back in the summer at the Pop Punk show, and he was asking me about being a therapist and what it's like, and he was like, yeah, me and Fights were tossing a football a few months ago on the beach and just all of a sudden talking about our parents and growing up. And I said, that's it. The original therapy room for men has been tossing a ball. Mike, what do you think of?
I probably need to use it more often, but just sharing a good plate of some chicken wings, we're going back to some Buffalo life. A shout out Duff's. I know no free ads. But I could see myself with a plate of wings or just any meal talking about life, what's going on, ups and downs, kind of similar to the whole avoiding eye contact. I'm focused on my meal, so I can hear you, I can
talk.
talk.
At the sports bar, so there's like sports on TV.
Yeah.
You're sitting next to each other, looking at the screen, just
and
chatting.
then just kind of, and then it's kind of nice too, is if I need to collect my thoughts, I take a couple more bites of a wing, as I try to figure out what's going to come out my mouth next. So I got a cup of it in my fridge right now.
Snake draft, Mike, but you're up again.
Oh God. Well, it's going to go back to a similar situation, but maybe less wings involved, and not that alcohol has to be part of this, but I think being out with the boys and just having a couple drinks, and then all of a sudden one song comes on that reminds you of something, or someone
Mr.
makes
Brightside.
one more remark, Mr. Brightside comes on, but something happens, and all of a sudden you guys are talking about feelings.
In our group slept, it was Sandstorm.
Sandstorm got you fired up. I remember getting they cut me off at the jukebox, I remember, for playing Zombie too many times, if I'm not mistaken.
Ooh, by the Cranberries?
Yeah, I think I put
a classic.
I think I went like 4 times in a row just to see how long it would take for everyone to realize they're still singing. That was during City Year. I couldn't really afford to be paying the jukebox like that either, too. That was an investment. That's a social experiment. So you're up, though.
I like my pick. If we're going to have people vote on this afterwards, I've got having a catch, and then at a bachelor party, which is the source for this conversation in the first place, bachelor party type weekends. What do you think it is about bachelor parties that let the feelings go?
It's kind of a funeral for your friend. Sorry to all the married folks, but yeah, it is. It's like you're sending your friend off to be with this other person, and they're going to be the more prominent part of their lives. They're going to start a family, and it's like one of the few times where like all of the boys are actually going to be together. And shout out Andrew Marcus. We went to his bachelor party in Playa del Carmen a couple of years ago, and we did a catered dinner, and we did a toast to Andrew, and got the waterworks going for sure. Yeah.
It's interesting. I think also like the type of and like style of bachelor party can indicate this. And by that, I'm talking about the types of substances that are being used when I say type of. So
right.
I feel like I've had ones that look different based on, different vibes.
Similar to what kind of Steve was saying too. I think the different recreational happenings might shape things one way or the other, but it's definitely a place where people get those feelings out.
I definitely think there's something about being away. Let's assume we're at our age, or at least most guys would be dating somebody, if not married, like in our group these days. Something about being away from your partner. I think it decreases stress in a way. Not that everyone's relationships are stressful, but it's certainly just able to let go of that for a little bit and be a little more, into yourself and less thinking about somebody else. But another thing that caught my eyes is that a bachelor party it's usually a collective feeling, and you're not competing with one another as much as you might be like when you're going out regularly, Mike. That like communal, that vibe.
Yeah, everyone's bought in.
The cool part too is like you're meeting people from, other walks of that person's life. So my favorite bachelor parties I go to are the ones where it's like, damn, we're all like similar, which is cool, but likely different enough either from hometown, college, job, whatever it is. There's enough differences, but usually an underlying theme that has everyone friends with that person. Yeah, you're final. We'll just do twos, and we're going to throw this up on the Instagram for people to vote.
Okay.
About their favorite.
Okay. For my last, I will go, again, sticking, lack of eye contact. It's horrible. I hate it. On a road trip, man, you're sitting there, again, like Mike with the wings, you're side by side with your buddy, have some tunes going. You're on the open road. The possibilities are ahead of you, and you're just letting it go. You're just talking. Sometimes you're not. Sometimes you're just sitting there jamming to the music, pointing at stuff as you drive by. But then, yeah, it does give you that opportunity like, oh, man, I haven't heard this song since whenever. And then inevitably, yeah, things just start coming out, start flowing, and the emotional conversations happen.
Shout out Tom Green, our guy. Mike's Leppian hero that we're trying to
he is my hero.
That's contact with him. But Tom Green, let us know. We're interested in chatting with him.
Or Brecken Meyer, anyone, DJ Qualls, anyone from Road Trip who wants to be on this podcast, we welcome. Sean William Scott.
Sean William Scott would be good.
Honorable mention for me would be fishing. And again, I think the thing that's consistent through all of mine is like there's times where you could be saying nothing and it's cool, or if you're letting it out, it's cool, but there's no pressure either way.
But also in yours, Richie, you're captive. They're like very specifics. And I guess you could stand up and leave from the campfire, but road trip and fishing, maybe, and you know what? It may be true for men, right? They need to be captive and not have a plan of escape.
Exactly.
Relaxed enough to open up. When these days, for me and my, I think the more emotionally versed friends of mine, when I go to a bachelor party, I've had experiences where there's been like a guy or two who just can't get there, whether they're still kind of bullies or they can't talk about feelings or they're, so like everybody's having a good time and vibing and you're kind of like, that guy, what's the deal? So I think the implication, Michael, is that you're going to be cool. And then when you're not, it's frustrating situations, not healthy, ungood, bad. In the words of Tim Woods,
just wanted to get something out there. Thank you.
Dungeons and Dragons master extraordinaire. There is nothing sexier than asking a woman for consent when you know you already have it. That, ladies and gentlemen, put that shit on a t-shirt. Excited to bring AJ on next. Our good friend Adriel Jeremiah, aka John Hamm, aka Don Draper Shapiro, to talk about growing up with dyslexia. It's a good interview. Good friend, you guys should know him well at this point. We'll be right back. Miss you, AJ. Why you're paying Kirk Cousins, I don't really understand what the Falcons are up to. To reintroduce our guy, Adriel Jeremiah Shapiro, a native of Atlanta, Georgia. That's a real Bulldogs-Bengals crossover there for you, AJ. And a big Atlanta sports fan, was a close friend of me and Richie's until he went and, fell in love and had to move back to Atlanta, which he called home originally. So shout out, true love. AJ, how much do you miss us?
Depends on the day, Basketball season, a whole awful lot, guys. I got nobody to talk ball with.
We keep the group thread flowing. So as we push into the neurodivergence block, the neurodiversity block, AJ was really kind enough to come on and talk with us about his experience of growing up living with dyslexia. And AJ, I want to make a special note that months and months ago, in the very infancy of the podcast, I asked AJ if he'd be willing to come on the show, and politely, respectfully, hell no, not interested. And I took that. And AJ, I'm just curious, did anything change? Like why now push yourself in this way when around a year ago it seemed rather like no thank you?
I mean, mostly just your persistence is the answer to that question. Truly, you ask and I'll eventually cave. No, but I don't know. I love the podcast. I'm a frequent listener.
And I think that it's a good way for us to start this, as we're always setting the stage here on these interviews of understanding people's experiences of getting on the internet and talking about a life experience of, we know dyslexia guys struggling with reading, struggling in school, it's raw for people. You know, we've learned about ADHD and OCD and autism already, AJ, when this interview will come out. And the experience of growing up with those things is challenging. So we want to start with a thank you for being willing to share your experience with the audience and help us understand better. Truly, AJ, something that even though I've worked with kids, I've worked in schools, I don't have a good way of understanding dyslexia. You start us off by giving the best picture you can give for our audience of what it's like living day to day with dyslexia.
The cliche that most people say is like you see words backwards, which to my experience is not the case. For me, it's closer to, there's that idea that when you look at a word, as long as the first and last letter of that word are where they're supposed to be, the rest of the letters can be jumbled and you can still kind of figure out what that word is. And that's because most people read by recognizing pictures and patterns. They're not sounding out a word, they're recognizing the picture and the pattern of that word and just moving on. Mm-hmm. Most dyslexic brains don't do that, so they can't make out what that word is. They have to sound out and read out every single word every single time, which makes it aggressively slow to read and aggressively hard to spell, which is like really the kicker is when you're trying to look into your brain and be like, is that a PH or an F? And is it I before E or is this the exception? There's so many different ways, and especially in English, that can trip you up.
So my feeling on that is like what might become natural or normal learned behavior for people, it just doesn't really become that throughout your life. It doesn't really become easier.
No, I mean, if you don't get the proper like training, really, no. And that's usually phonics, which is like a different way of learning, you know, how to read and write that is separate from like your English classes as a kid. But phonics, which I did go to a special school as an elementary school for kids with specifically like dyslexia and other learning disabilities, that teaches like phonics is like a series of rhymes, really. It's like I before E except after C is a phonics term that helps you learn these rules and patterns, and dyslexia, especially with rhyming, like tends to remember these kind of like turns of phrase that allow you to remember all these rules.
Yeah, of course. It's, you know, fortunate that you were able to have the support and resources you needed. At what age, what was the story behind figuring out that something was up?
Yeah, I mean, I was like relatively unaware that there was an issue because I got diagnosed in like kindergarten, first grade. So I was not like, man, I'm not good at this. Like it just like kind of happened where like, I guess like I'm fortunate enough that I had some teacher along the way that turned to my mom and kind of like winked and nudged and was like, you should go get him tested for dyslexia. And so my mom took me to get tested I guess I was in like kindergarten or first grade, because by second grade I was at this specialty school. And like the only thing I can remember before getting to this specialty school that was like mildly embarrassing was like, you're learning to read and write and you're asked to write some sentences or whatever. And I went and asked my teacher how you spelled the, because I couldn't figure out the TH. I didn't remember the pattern that makes a TH sound. And she's like, THE. And she said it as if I was messing with her, like I was being a shithead. And that's the first time I remember being like, something is like, she thought I was serious and she thought I was kidding.
It's interesting how that stuff sticks with you. You know, and I wonder, AJ, you also had ADHD and was a part of growing up with both those things. Can you remember, you know, you ended up in this school, like it was different, a different school than other kids in your neighborhood went, a different school than kids from summer camp went. Like, when can you first remember like, oh shit, like there's a difference? What's up with that?
No, I mean, I understood immediately that my parents explained pretty directly, like you have this thing called dyslexia. You're going to go to a private, I had two brothers that were still in public school and I was in private school. So like I was pretty hyper aware that I'm getting some special treatment and like, to be honest, used dyslexia as a crutch, like well through high school was like, oh, great. Like I get a get out of jail free card for like screwing up a test or whatever. It's like, oh, it just took me a while. I was reading slow, you know, like maybe I was just underprepared, but like definitely got to use it as a crutch or an excuse for a long time.
Which is interesting to reflect on as a grown man, right? And it's so common. I was just working with one of my parents and her son with ADHD, and he's 14, and she's like, I can see it. I can see him using this as an excuse. I can see him not holding himself accountable. And so that's such an interesting thing for you to reflect on, to be like, I knew it was a problem, but I also didn't have any problem using it to my advantage.
It's funny now because like I love to learn. I like to absorb information. I also work as a writer professionally. And so I like know all the ways to deal with it and persevere with it. But like at the time, I was more willing to just be an average student because I didn't want to apply myself. And my parents were, to no fault of their own, just like, well, that's what more can you ask for? He's got dyslexia.
And did you feel like that? Like there was a lower bar? Like, has it ever felt like that for you? People pity, or there's like a lower bar for you?
No, I think I put that on myself and set that expectation for everybody around me. I was vocal about, what do you want from me? I've got dyslexia, you know, like.
Yeah. I wonder, like, ever made like a way to cope, maybe?
Potentially. It was certainly a way, like a reason not to try. I like if you feel like you're already set back. And like, I do remember my dad would say things like, you know, when I was applying myself and it was still hard, my dad would try to say these encouraging things like, hey, if it takes your friends an hour, but it takes you an hour and a half, 2 hours, like, we're just going to have to deal with it. And I'm like, no, like, you're getting the same hour, but whatever I get is what it's going to be, you know, like, and I was like unwilling to put in the extra work. And to be honest, like, I am so lucky to have been born in the era of technology where now there's speak text. And like, I remember you would type a word into Microsoft Word, and even spell check back in the day was like, I've got no idea what you're trying to say, man. So,
Yeah.
And so then you're just dumbing yourself down to words you do know how to spell. You have the vocabulary in your brain. You just can't figure out how to spell it. Great. Let's go with an easier word. So a lot of like dumbing yourself down for sure.
That paints a really good picture for people to be like, I want to express myself in the written form, and yet I cannot. I think as men, we all would recognize, like, when anxiety's got us or sadness, we have a hard time expressing verbally. We understand children can't express themselves verbally, autistic people, right? So I'm just naming that experience of not being able to communicate properly is frustrating. And I hope we can all see and understand that. You mentioned some of the technology things, AJ. What are some of the ways you've had to adjust or adapt throughout your life to get you where you are now?
Well, like back in the day, weirdly enough, they paired two different disabled people together, and I was a member of the dyslexic and blind community. You wouldn't think they go together, but these are the people that need books on tape. And I could get any book I wanted on tape, especially my textbooks, which was great because I love audio learning and I would listen and read along and whatever. But they literally came on cassettes with like the most like, and it would be, if it's your textbook, it's 15 cassettes, you know, your one textbook. Right.
Cassettes for our younger audience were oil-based reels. It was in plastic. I can't. It's hard to explain what a cassette. Yeah.
It's so boring. The voice, like it's not a voice artist that's reading that thing. It is like the dude that works there got paid to read it. You know, like
Penguin Publishing.
Right. And it was brutal, but that's like how I got through a lot of school. And then we extra time on tests, things like that. I could have somebody take notes for me if upon request. That was like some of the services you would get as a kid. But like now, I mean, you can record your teacher's lectures. You can have all the you can speak into your phone and it'll type for you. Kids aren't even learning cursive. Like, I mean, to be honest, like that was the hard, like learning two different versions of writing is like, it was absolutely brutal, you know? Like,
how'd you do? This is a separate thing. Did you learn Hebrew?
Ish, like, you know, and like you love the jokes of like, is this better for you because you read this direction?
Thinking about it, like, because obviously this seems like a simple question, but guys, I don't know dyslexia very well. Like, it's not going to change in another language.
No, but you'd be surprised that like there is a list, and I don't have it off the top of my head, but like English is way down on languages that are easy for people with dyslexia. Like there are other languages that just have way simpler, you know, turns of phrase, way less rules, way less exceptions to their rules. English is surprisingly really hard for people with, yeah.
How about today, day to day, AJ? I know you're leveraging a lot of technology, it sounds like, but do you think there's any ways in the work world or in the way you're communicating that you feel like you have to account for that others may not?
I mean, so as I mentioned, I work as a writer. I write in the advertising world. I feel really lucky that this current job has proofreaders and not, my boss who at my previous job would send me messages like age in group chats. He would say, AJ, if you make one more typo, I'm gonna fucking kill you. And he's doing it in a lighthearted tone of voice. He's trying to be playful. I understand, but at the same time, it's like, how do I explain this to my boss that like I am doing everything I can to not make these typos? I am like combing this. My brain just will not let me see the typos, like it takes so much diligence to catch them. And when you're moving fast, you're working hard, you're trying to get projects in, like you're just bound to miss something.
Had you had that conversation with him?
I never felt like I could approach the guy. He was tough, and I probably should have had a more direct conversation. I would hint, I'm like, well, I'm dyslexic, I'm trying, but like not a really direct, like, if you want me to work here, this is just something that's going to be part of the deal conversation, which I probably should have had.
Yeah, and it's hard, AJ. I think this is something any of us can understand. While you have certain rights for accommodations with the Americans with Disabilities Act, we as men, we as humans, mostly Americans, like, don't take handouts, don't do this, don't set yourself up to be different, but like, it must have been hard to not be seen in those moments, or to feel, again, it may pull you all the way back to the time that the teacher didn't understand why you were asking how to spell the.
And it's also one of those things where I think dyslexia, similar to like an ADHD, and you might know this better than me, being somebody that actually diagnoses people, but people self-diagnose a lot and then will tell people that they have this thing. So when I say I have dyslexia and I went through all these tests and I went to a specialized school and I lived in all of this extra, notes and books on tape and yada yada, when I say I'm dyslexic, it carries just as much weight as the guy sitting next to me who's like, yeah, I think I'm dyslexic too. And like, people weight that the same and don't give maybe the benefit of the doubt to me that they, if that makes sense what I'm saying.
Yeah, no, it does. I think that internet craze of self-diagnosis that we've seen with most of the neurodiversity conditions, ADHD, OCD, has gotten very popular, autism, self-diagnosis, all this stuff, which it's a balance, right, AJ? I think you and I would both want people who have struggled to be able to understand that, get resources and learn what they need to learn, but also not to make light of what are some obviously serious impairing conditions.
Oh, I actually think it's the former, as most people are probably finding themselves online and being like, oh, maybe I do have this thing, but to whatever degree or really understand. You might have an OCD tendency. We like to, everything is on a spectrum. You might have an OCD tendency, but when you say I have OCD, that gets weighted the same as the person who like really suffers on their day-to-day functions because of their OCD.
Which is interesting because the alternative is you go through more of like a formal process with HR and with, the ADA and those kinds of things. And AJ, it's an unfortunate truth and something that, of course, advocates across the country for a variety of conditions are pushing for. But like, to say that you don't get treated differently in a workplace or something when you're asking for those accommodations, like, we wish it wasn't the case, but you do inevitably get treated differently.
There's the other side of it, which is feeling weird that you're getting treated differently if you need special accommodations, which is like something that I have never really sought because I do not want to feel burdened or that I'm getting some sort of sympathy or forgiveness. Like, I want to do my job as well as the person sitting next to me. And I certainly don't want to feel like somebody is letting me off the hook, basically. So thank God for proofreaders is basically what I'm saying.
Right. I mean, I was going to say the example of your boss. Do you think there's other ways that what's a nice word for stubborn, that willfulness, that difficulty accepting those accommodations and not wanting to feel different, that I think we could all understand has impacted you?
Not like when you asked earlier, did I like have the conversation with them? I dropped it in. I sprinkled it in meetings, like, by the way, or like in a random one-off conversation. Oh, well, I'm dyslexic. I'm certainly not throwing it out when he's upset about typos. I'm certainly not being like, well, the reason is, I just take it on the chin. And you have to find a boss, especially if you're going to be a writer, you have to find a boss who's who's willing to accommodate. Like, it's don't necessarily think it's his if his job is not to be anybody else's spell checker, then I don't know if he necessarily like has to opt in to be mine. I have to rise with the occasion.
Yeah, things that as we grow, right, you want to continue to live a good functional life, like you said. I'm curious if we could flip the script a little bit. Do you think that having dyslexia has you either have any advantages because of it, there's strengths you can see if you try to, look at things a certain way?
Yeah, they're like really obvious, weirdly. And when you're when I was diagnosed, even the like internet wasn't prevalent enough to now, like you can go Google dyslexia and see 1,000 aggressively successful people that point to that, but it makes you more creative in certain aspects. It allows you to see full pictures instead of focus in. They say that your understanding when you're reading, like your comprehension, is aggressively high because, I mean, to be honest, when you have to read it 3 times, this is basically how it works. The first time you read a sentence, you have to just figure out what each word is. Then the second time you read it, you figure out what the rhythm of the sentence is and how each word works together. And the third time you read it is for comprehension. But by the time you read something 3 times, you know that information, So while it takes me a long time to read, I absorb that information fully. Because I grew up learning all of these, I before E rhyme patterns and stuff like that. Like, I got so good at memorizing and creating rhyme patterns that I've now myself written like 1,000 poems and raps that I know off the top of my head. I've never once put paper to pen. They're all memorized in my head. I can remember them in a second. I can recite them anytime you want. I can pull them out like it's a filing cabinet.
AJ, though he was never all that willing to let us come, has been done poetry in Denver and missed the boat on getting to come see you there. But, it makes sense, right? Like, if you couldn't reliably rely on the written word and verbal sight, then I would imagine your brain will accommodate to take things in, auditorily and those ways. And so it makes sense if you think about just what you're going to foster in terms of your brain and its strengths. My second to last question is, what would you want people to know about dyslexia? What are the common misconceptions or things you'd want them to know after they finish up this interview today?
The kid that just found out that he has dyslexia, that kid, it's like, you're going to be fine, especially now. Just like, get strong in your audio learning and lean into the technology, and also like embrace that superpower side of like, you're going to be super creative. You're going to have a like deep vision of like the way things work and the way things tick, and ask those questions. Be as curious as your brain wants you to be. And for people that don't have dyslexia, that are just engaging, like, have a little patience. Don't ask me to read out loud. Give me a heads up before you want me to present in a business meeting so that I have time to learn the material and I'm not reading on the spot. Just things like, there's certain really basic accommodations that make my life easier, and I don't harp when they're not met. But like, if you're able to help me out, oh man, it's so much better.
Points to the show's basic mantra, which is, we don't know, especially with dyslexia. You would not have any idea, looking at this list of people with dyslexia, you wouldn't know. Clearly, it's one of those conditions where you just would not know. And so to be patient and kind with people, because you never know what someone's up against and what they're dealing with that day. Final question, high stakes here, AJ. 6 months from now, we'll be in week 1 of the NFL season. Who will be playing quarterback for the Atlanta Falcons?
I mean, it's either Penix, right? That seems to be the obvious choice, but I'd like to think that there's like some old quarterback that's never really done anything substantial, but he just hit 37, 38, and we'll give him like $102 million to do nothing for our team.
So
and
they'd be paying Cousins and this fictional guy?
I like to think once a year we give out charity to the oldest quarterback who's never been successful anywhere. And that way we can really blow it on having money to pay anybody else on the roster. I think that's the Falcons' way.
How is the hype around Penix on the local radio?
God, I don't tune in enough, but Atlanta likes him. And he's reminiscent of some other Atlanta classics, from being one letter off from being male genitalia. Love that in Atlanta.
In a real bros being boys moment, for everyone listening, AJ, you remember that time you, me, and Richie just sat and watched Michael Vick highlights for like 30 straight minutes?
Look, if any therapist wants to get me emotional, we're going to watch Derrick Rose and we're going to watch Mike Vick highlights, and we're all going to have a cry.
Derrick Rose, what could have and should have been. Well, AJ, thank you so much for your time. And again, your honesty and vulnerability and helping educate our audience, man. It really means a lot. Not unnoted.
My pleasure.
All right, y'all. We'll be back to induct Anderson Cooper into the BHoF right after this. This week for the Bromotions Hall of Fame, we are inducting Anderson the Silver Fox Cooper, born June 3rd, 1967 in New York City. He was the child of Gloria Vanderbilt. That's right, those Vanderbilts. His mother, Gloria, and his father, Wyatt Emery Cooper, who was a writer. Creativity, of course, running through his genes at a young age, but not all glory, not all easy upbringing, in spite of his wealth growing up, and that his father, Wyatt, died of heart attack when he was aged 11. And his older brother actually went on to commit suicide when Anderson was 21. His brother was 2 years older than him. Anderson Cooper has been very open, talking about grief and how it has impacted his life and made him who he is. Here's a good quote I liked. Loss is a theme that I think about a lot, and it's something that in my work that I dwell on. I think when you have the experience any kind of loss, especially the kind I did, you have questions about survival. Why do some people thrive in situations that others can't tolerate? Would I be able to survive and get on in the world on my own? So Anderson cites his grief work and his connection to those themes being what pushed him into journalism. He actually was a poli-sci major at Yale, little school, maybe you've heard of it, and he worked at the CIA before deciding to shift things up and go into journalism. His career began on a big stage. He was on Channel 1 News in New York City, promoted from there to ABC News nationally, and then has been with CNN since 2001. His acclaimed show AC 360 has been on since 2006. In that time, he's covered huge events, really became super famous during Hurricane Katrina and his coverage of that, the Haiti earthquake in 2010. In 2016, he was the first LGBT person to host a presidential debate in 2016 when he hosted between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton. So really cool things there. He's certainly been an advocate for LGBT rights and as well as grief work and the emotional capacity that it takes to be a father. He's a fun host on the New Year's Eves with his boy Andy Cohen, and we know how they all end up doing things. But why the Bromotions Hall of Fame this week? As we mentioned, Anderson was diagnosed with dyslexia at a young age. I pulled a clip of him actually speaking at the National Center for Learning Disabilities Awards, and here's him talking about what it was like.
I was honored to be asked by Ann and to be here to support NCLD's mission. I don't know how many of you know, when I was a kid, I was diagnosed with a mild form of dyslexia. And it was funny, Ann, who knows me very well and has known me since I was very, very little, turned to me earlier and said, "You did not have dyslexia." And I think it's a sign of probably how well I tried to hide it when I was a little kid. My brother was a voracious reader. He was 2 years older than I, and he was always reading books. I remember I would always carry a book around with me, but I never was actually reading the book. I would pretend to read the book because I had trouble obviously reading and making sense of words and in particular letters. Luckily, I went to a school that caught the problem very quickly and was able to figure out the problem and diagnose it. And luckily, I had access to people who could really help. And I remember every couple of times a week, I used to go to a doctor named Dr. Jansky, who I called my reading doctor. I didn't really know what she was. But I remember at the time, being concerned that other people would find out about it. And I didn't want other kids in my class to find out about it because, I sort of went to this special place to, at the time, I think part of the treatment was learning how to type. I'm not sure exactly why, but I'm quite a good typer now. So I thank her for that. But to me, it's a sign of just the importance the school plays in a young child's life, and in particular, a child with LD. To a child with learning disabilities, as you know, school can be an incredibly isolating place. It can be a place that's incredibly frustrating and frankly overwhelming. And that's why it's so important that we're recognizing the two schools that we're recognizing today.
So a few important things you heard there. One, tried to hide it. Shame, school, becoming an anxiety-provoking place. That's the stuff I want people thinking about when they think about how someone might have struggled, how that can inform their self-esteem and who they are today, just as AJ did in the interview there. So Anderson did a great job there emphasizing the importance of schools, emphasizing how important it is to have those like Dr. Jansky, who was helpful for Anderson, but teachers who can help recognize things, make the environment supportive. So a lot of really good stuff said there in that speech. Just pointing out that you can have certain struggles. You can have issues like dyslexia and still go on to be Anderson fucking Cooper, right? So as long as you get the right support and we help foster the strengths in our kids and our adults who struggle in various ways, then really the sky remains the limit. All right. So Anderson helping us see that today, and a very, very worthy inductee into the Bromotions Hall of Fame. So we'll be back to wrap up after this. Bless, not a very data-driven show today. Our only source to cite is Anderson Cooper's Wikipedia page, which also brought me to that video clip that we saw where he did such a nice job talking about his experience with dyslexia as a kid. So what are our 3 takeaways? Bros can talk feelings. Sometimes it just needs to be the right time, place, and circumstance. 2, as AJ pointed out, patience, understanding, making sure we come into situations with empathy, and this show should be helping us do that. 3, Anderson Cooper, if given the right support and the right resources, that anybody with any type of situation can thrive, can succeed, and really set a standard for what kindness like Anderson Cooper does and the way he conducts himself. Very easily could see things going another way for a kid who struggled in school and with self-esteem, and what a great way he's rebounded and shown us the way. So as we do, I'll wrap the show the way we started, which is, hey, we want to hear from you. Please give some feedback so we can take it into the future of this show. And otherwise, we will wrap as we do by reminding us all, let's find ways to be kind and gentle out in the world this week. See you next time.